Hello, this is Nick Dolia. I'm here with my partner Nelson Saba, and we wanted to record a video for you explaining what is EPIKA, what are we trying to build here. So with that, Nelson, let's talk a little bit about what is EPIKA, what is the vision of the product, what are we trying to build?
Yeah, I think the simple answer is EPIKA is the Bible. But is the Bible rendered in a different way? Is the Bible rendered using interactive digital media, immersive media, so you can experience the Bible stories, you can explore the biblical world rather than just reading the text. You still have the text to read or to listen to, but you also are able to experience and immerse yourself in the culture and the stories of the Bible.
But why we're building it. So let's talk about the future of the Bible, what the Bible is today and how it can be better experienced by the users.
I mean, being very frank, the reason why this is something that I felt that I wanted to pursue is that the power of interactive digital media allows you to communicate the message of the Bible in a far more powerful way than just the Bible text. And you absorb that message in different ways because of the visual communication and the ability to experience everything. But it so happens that we live in what we call a digital world, where you have already two entire generations of digital natives. These are people that were born with an iPad, an iPhone in their hands, and they use those media more than any other. Actually, they almost use exclusively those medias to a great extent. And what we see today is that the inadequacy of the traditional paper format of the Bible sometimes makes these digital natives not engage with scripture like the prior generations used to. And today there are some quite scary statistics. It shows, for instance, that Gen Z, they are interested in the Bible. They believe the Bible can help them. They will be open. Actually, a lot of reports called the open generation. They will be open to the Bible, but we never reach them. We never connect with them because the Bible is not in a format that they engage. It's not in a format that they identify with. It's almost like translating the Bible to a different language, going to a people that does not have the Bible in their language. Well, what we're doing is exactly that. We're translating the Bible into the interactive digital media language of the digital natives. And what happens is, if you don't engage them while they're open, while they are Gen Zs in their teenager years or so, as they go through adulthood, there is a drop, substantial drop of over 70% of those who were open and interested, no longer being open and interested, and they go cold for the rest of their lives. So this is one of the hopes we have very much through EPIKA, is to create a digital Bible that connects with these digital natives.
And we have done that before, specifically you. Can
Yes.
you talk a little bit about Illumina and Glow? We'll jump to next, but what is the history? Like, this is the third time we're doing this.
It is. The first time we applied this concept of being able to live the Bible. Actually, the slogan of Illumina is "Live the Bible." It was back in 2001 when we launched through Tyndale House Publishers. We launched the Illumina Bible. And it actually had a surprise success. Estimates were maybe we'll sell 50,000 copies in the Christmas season. It actually went over 160,000, and it was a major success in the Christian publishing industry.
And it was a box product. So actually, we do have a box. I don't know, we'll see how well you can see it. It sold for probably about
This was like $49.99.
$49.99.
Yeah.
But this was the world when life was on CDs.
Yes.
Computers
Yes.
weren't very powerful.
Yeah, but it was extremely successful, and the reason why it was successful is because this was not a product designed for scholars, seminary students, serious Bible students. It was a product designed for the average family, for the average Christian, for the casual Bible reader. A product that daddy and the kid could engage together, exploring the biblical world and experiencing the stories.
So actually, you can see how good the graphics were back even
Yeah,
over 20 years ago.
yes, this was 20 years ago, but it's a pretty powerful recreation, actually, of the crucifixion of Jesus. And this uses the Shroud of Turin as a basis for the details of the crucifixion process, is actually a pretty good and accurate in terms of how it represents the biblical narratives, despite of the fact that it is or not an authentic relic. It was a relic that accurately represents from the biblical standpoint and influenced all of the images and paintings of Jesus until today. So that's why we chose it. Yeah, this was a reconstruction we did of the city of Jerusalem in the 1st century. You can actually, even back in those days, 20 years ago, you could already walk around Jerusalem, but we were using only pre-rendered images, not like today that you can really go through the entire city. We also did stories on the book of Exodus. This is Pharaoh. We did a number of the stories that are very relevant in the book of Exodus. That's the idea of Illumina and also EPIKA, is to be episodical. You cannot do the whole Bible at once. So you start with some more emblematic stories and you keep adding stories as you go.
So Illumina was the first great success, but it had its run. It was a product.
Actually, 3 generations. We had the Illumina, then the Illumina Gold, and then the Illumina Platinum Edition. And it was a major success as a product, and then the times change, technology changes so fast, and we enter the era of mobile, and that's when Glow came out. Glow actually came first as a box product, but soon it became predominantly an app, an iPad app, an iPhone app, but also a Mac app, and that actually had 3.5 million downloads. In many moments, it was actually the best-selling in the category of reference. It won a number of awards. USA Today actually named the coolest product for the fall, which was one of the peaks in sales.
Like in 2009, 2010.
Yeah, and then we actually were the first digital product to be named Bible of the Year by the Evangelical Christian Publishers Association, ECPA. So it was another major success, different technology adapted to mobile, but still a product designed for families, for individuals, for digital natives, because digital natives feel very comfortable with this kind of technology.
But I think it's important to emphasize that Illumina, Glow, and now EPIKA are full Bible. This is not just parts of the story.
Exactly.
This is a full Bible. This is a Bible product with cool technology to bring it to life.
Exactly. That's very much summarizes it. And if you think, Illumina, Glow, and EPIKA are kind of like an evolution of the same product, just leveraging on the latest technology to fully realize the vision. Back 20 years ago, it was really hard to realize this vision of immersing yourself in the biblical world. Nowadays, it's a very different story. You can really create an immersive experience that ultimately allows you to immerse yourself in the biblical world, watch the stories in location. Also, a very key aspect is this was designed to be a platform for the church, a platform for pastors, seminary students, anyone who has a desire, a small group leader that meets at home, anyone who has a desire to communicate a message, whatever that message is, they can actually leverage on the sets that we created to communicate that message using our sets and doing it from there.
So what you see here is actually a recreation of City of Capernaum. And we'll talk in a second why Capernaum was important. This was built by us using archaeological records.
Yeah.
This is how City of Capernaum on the Sea of Galilee would have looked like in the 1st century in the time of Jesus. And now let's actually jump over for a second and talk about the importance of Capernaum. Why did we start there? So if you look here, you see a map of Middle East, specifically Israel, Egypt, Nile Delta. This is Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, but northern Israel, Capernaum. Talk a little bit about Via Mari's importance of northern Israel in the times of Jesus.
One of the things that's quite striking when you recreate Capernaum in the 1st century, it's when you realize how simple and small of a fisherman's village that was. It's about 1,200 people who used to live there. Very, very poor, very, very simple, but strategically located. It was one of the branches of the Via Maris. The Via Maris would actually go through the middle of Capernaum.
So if you look, Via Maris goes through Capernaum and kind of down the coast and goes into Egypt.
Yes. So it was one of the two major trading routes of those times. In those times, there were two trading routes. One was the Via Maris, or the Way of the Sea, and there was the Way of the Kings, which was in the Jordan side of the Jordan River, and so Jesus chose a very strategic location, a trading route with lots of people passing by. Great for you to spread the word, to spread the message. Was
So
key.
if you look right here, this is city of Capernaum. This is Church of Beatitudes, or
Yeah.
Mount of Beatitudes. Can you talk a little bit about
Mount
the
of
importance?
Beatitudes. Yeah, I mean, most of the ministry of Jesus, the short few years of ministry of Jesus, happened with his headquarters in the city of Capernaum. And most of that ministry was in the vicinities of Capernaum. Like we hear a lot of the parables that were told. I mean, a lot of them were told by what you call the sower's cove, which
So
is
this actually is what's
yeah.
considered to be Sower's Cove. It's amphitheater-like
Yeah.
cutout, and you can actually, that's where Jesus gets
yeah.
in the boat, comes out, and he can speak to people
Yeah.
that are going here. And Via Maris kind of ran by here, so people
Yeah,
are walking
Via Maris
by.
passes by it, and this is a kind of like mysterious, concept. I mean, Jesus wants to speak to a crowd, and it says there was such a large crowd, so Jesus enters a boat and goes further away. So why would you do that? Well, this is a natural amphitheater. So as you go with your boat a little bit more towards the center of this amphitheater,
Right here.
you can speak with a normal voice, and everyone sitting in that amphitheater, natural amphitheater, will hear the message. So it's one of the chosen places for Jesus to preach. And also he would, I mean, the Sermon on the Mount was in right above the Sower's Cove, the Mount of Beatitudes. That's another famous location. And Capernaum is the setting of so many of his miracles and stories of the Bible.
So if we look at Capernaum, how it looks today, it's more of a tourist attraction. You can see the city was actually bigger. You can see some ruins over here, but this is the wall of preserved Capernaum. If you come there today, this is kind of where tourist buses park right here. You can park cars. Franciscans built a little building for themselves. They take care of the site.
Yeah.
This is the first century synagogue, would have been this piece. It was expanded in 3rd and 4th century. And right here, this is where Peter's house is. And we'll actually have another video to talk to you about the history of Peter's house. But today there's a Catholic church, octagonal church that sits right on top. So actually, let's take a minute and just drop into Capernaum just to show you what it looked like, what it looks like today. So this is kind of Sea of Galilee. This is the waterfront. And as soon as this comes into focus, regretfully, internet is not cooperating. But right here, that's the synagogue. And this is kind of Peter's house where octagonal church today sits.
You see that the city, the ruins of the city are dark in color.
There it is.
And this is all basalt stone, volcanic rock. That's the only kind of rock that existed in this area. The synagogue in there, in the different type, is limestone. That's a 4th century, 3rd century synagogue that was built actually on top of the 1st century one. And these stones that had to be brought from somewhere else. Although they are the most used stones, the limestone, you can see the contrast. And that right there shows that this is a later period.
So what we have done is we've now built a demo to show you how our product is going to work in the future as it expands. We focused on city of Capernaum. So now let's jump over and actually show you what we have built. So we're using Unreal Engine 5.4. This is the same one as used for 3D video games that everybody plays. So this is the latest technology. And this allows us to basically bring the Bible and show you how the product will work. Now, all of this will change. These are just graphics that are used as placeholders as we're developing the product, but we'll give you an idea of how this works. So if you click on Bible, here you have a whole Bible laid out. And talk a little bit about zoomable interface and kind of how we're...
Yeah, I mean, we use the concept of zoomable user interfaces all over EPIKA. And zoomable user interfaces is a great way for you to deal with really vast amounts of content, such as the Bible. And you literally here, for instance, once you identify the book of the Bible that you want to read, you zoom into it, you see all the chapters, and then you zoom inside that chapter. So it's a very natural user interface. And what we did here, we kind of grouped the books of the Bible to give you a sense for how the Bible is organized.
So we started in the demo with Parable of the Sower, which
Yeah.
is in actually Mark chapter 4. So for the demo purposes, if you click on Mark, you will see now you have all of Mark laid out. You can click on chapter 4, and this is where you have Parable of the Sower. And we kind of have this clean reading format when if you want to read the Bible by itself, you
Yeah.
can. We'll have multiple translations. We're probably thinking about what NIV, ESV, and LT to start, and multiple languages. Talk a little bit about kind of
Yeah,
how this is.
well, I mean, we will certainly have a number of the top translations in English. We had them in Illumina and in Glow, and we'll also have them in EPIKA. The favorite ones being the NIV, the ESV, the NLT, the New Living Translation, is a really good translation for this type of product. And other translations like the major Catholic translations and other things like the NRSV. So we'll have a number of the main translations. The idea is not to overwhelm the user with translations, but is to have the translation that you usually use when you go to your church. That's mainly the idea. New King James, King James. So all those major ones will be there. But also we will be able to include other languages and translations in like Portuguese, in Spanish, in Korean, and because of our relationship with United Bible Societies that holds actually the rights to the majority of the major translations of the Bible around the world.
And it's important to mention here that we are just the Bible. Can you talk about Nicene Creed, the interfaith that we're really allowing everybody else to put their message on top of our platform?
Yeah, something we're always very careful about is to make sure that if you read the Bible and interpret in a certain way, we want you to experience the Bible through EPIKA and also get to the same conclusions that you did. So we try in our representation of the visual representation, we try to be accurate. We don't try to interpret the text. So we want to create Capernaum as close as possible to how Capernaum was back in the first century. We want to tell the stories using as accurate of a research as it existed about how the culture of those times and the people used to dress and everything. So you really have a sense of immersing yourself back in the culture of the biblical times, but we avoid trying to interpret. Our animations are word from scripture. We don't add words, we don't take words. The only words actually that we take out is what the Bible says a lot of times, and he said, and she said. So that's unnecessary because you see the person talking, and therefore we take those things out. But other than that, when you watch a story on EPIKA, you are watching the Bible.
So there's a lot of Bibles out there that are electronic, that are in paper, but the magic of EPIKA is where we can bring it to life. So as you scroll over, for example, to Parable of the Sower, all of a sudden you have new features appear. There'll be commentary on the upper right, which is interesting, but we'll also have in the lower right, as you can see, Bible stories. We'll have actually animation here, and we'll show you in other videos of Parable of the Sower, which will animate it word for word. You'll also have virtual photos. You can see pictures, you can see related materials, but then you'll also be able to go and see what this looked like in the first century. And this is where our product shines. So if I click on this, this is city of Capernaum as it looked like in the first century. So you saw what we showed you as kind of the Google Maps. Can you talk a little bit about the waterfront and kind of
Yeah, the harbor that you see there was actually a Jewish archaeologist who did a whole research underwater of the remains of the harbor, and he actually designed this harbor based on archaeological evidence. So we recreated accurately what his findings were. The location of these houses are all extremely well documented by the Franciscans, and that's exactly what we did. We followed the layout of the city based on the archaeological digs and recreated all of Capernaum as it was accurately in the first century, including the synagogue, which you see is narrower because it's just the first century synagogue. Peter's house has all the different rooms in it that are...
So this is important, and we'll have a separate video in more detail about Peter's house. But Peter's house is where you see octagonal church. Can you talk just briefly about this?
Yeah, actually, this to me is so telling about how simple life was in those days and how simple Jesus was. What you see here, that open area that you see, this was the first Christian church that ever existed. And this is where believers would gather with Jesus in Peter's house. And this was actually, when you see that big church that exists today was created on top of this area. This area is known to be Peter's house because you find in the archaeological digs, people wrote Jesus, Lord, in the room. And then when you look at this room, you will see that later on in the second, third century, it was plastered. They were ornated. So clearly this was a big thing, a big deal.
And the feature of our product is you'll be able to walk around Capernaum, and eventually Jerusalem will go to next, and all of other kind of biblical sites. You'll be able to actually walk inside and see. So we actually walk inside the synagogue. Yeah. And this is what the first century synagogue would look like. You see the lighting changes as you come in as your eyes get used to the darkness.
The darker, yeah.
And then can you talk a little about the benches? Some people don't know what the synagogue looked like. What was the synagogue like in the first century?
The synagogue was central to the community life in a Jewish village like this. And it would be not only a place of, it was not a place of worship, it was a place of gathering for reading of the scriptures and for listening to messages from rabbis. They usually would speak either from a pulpit or sitting on what was called the Moses seat that you see there in the back. And people would just sit around the benches of the synagogue. And it's quite interesting that I read somewhere that these pillars were partially designed to block your view so that you'd listen and pay attention to the message. Also, you see next to the door, you see a box. This was called the Ark. This is where the Torah would be stored. Jairus was the head of the synagogue, and he would bring every morning the cart with the Torah inside the synagogue, and was a place of worship, place of gathering, many times a place of teaching also, where kids would have classes and everything else.
And again, this is where in 3rd and 4th century synagogue was expanded. So in that picture you saw, it was actually a little wider.
Yeah, I mean, the synagogue was expanded to the market, so there would be no room for the market.
And actually, that's where Via Maris ran. If you look at the street running through the market,
exactly, that was the street where the Via Maris comes in, then it turns, and then to the right it continues. So the Via Maris would literally pass by the synagogue and pass by the market, and then continue all the way to the sea.
So what we've done, we built City of Capernaum, but we also wanted to build some other important sites. And we mentioned Sower's Cove. So in our product, you'll be able to actually go to the Sower's Cove. And this is, let me zoom out a little bit. This is what Sower's Cove would have looked like in the 1st century.
Yeah, the natural amphitheater.
It's kind of natural amphitheater, and this is kind of, we'll have this animation also where we're explaining how Sower's Cove worked. But there's no sowing at Sower's Cove. Parable of the sower really talks about sowing, but it talks about terrace farms. Can you talk about what is a terrace farm? Why is it important?
It's interesting that of all the parables, the most known, most read, and considered most relevant parable is the parable of the sower. So much so that the Bible clearly says Jesus used to come to this area and told many stories, but somehow the parable of the sower gave the name to the cove. So it's the sower's cove.
Yes.
But nobody would sow anything here. Sowing was done back in those days in terrace farms. And we do have a terrace farm in the back of Capernaum.
So this is where Capernaum was, and I'll just jump in here for a second, but actually I'll just show you in relationship. If you go, Sea of Galilee is in the front, but if you go toward the back, this is where terrace farms would have been. And we're still building this.
Yeah, we're building a final terrace farm that looks more accurate, but you can actually go there to show why is the sower in pink?
It's one of the builds. But you will see in the parable of the sower, you see there's a bedrock, and then you'll put a wall. And
but the idea here is you had a hill, and that hill was mostly basalt bedrock, and obviously very hard for you to sow anything there. So what they would do, they would create these retaining walls, which we call terrace farms, and they would fill the retaining wall with good soil, which is where they wanted to cultivate whatever. There was a piece of path, which is bedrock, that was preserved so the sower can actually walk
Kind of the
through it.
gray area toward the wall.
Yeah.
That's where the sower would
Yeah,
walk.
and he can walk through that path and throw seeds, and the seeds obviously he will throw into good soil.
And the good soil is here gray. And again, this will be all more dressed up. And
Yeah,
better in
it
the
will be
final
a
product,
lot
but
more
that gives
dressed
you
up.
an idea.
But you can actually get a little closer to the wall next to the feet, and you will see here there is a better representation of the different elements. But you know, it's quite evident that a sower, being a professional, he would throw most of the seeds in the good soil. But inevitably, when you throw the seeds, some are going to fall in the path, and then the birds come and eat those. Some will will fall in the shallow soil, which is this transition. You have a bedrock that dips in, and then you have the good soil, but there is a transition. In that transition, you have shallow pools of soil, but you know the seed sprouts, but there is not enough room for them to create roots. And some of them will get very close to the retaining wall where there are lots of thorns and bushes, and those would certainly choke the plant, and the plant would not be able to grow. That's essentially what the parable of the sower is about. It's talking about how we receive God's word, receive God's message in different ways, like these different soils, and that we should strive to have an open heart and an open mind to be a fruitful ground for God's word to flourish in us. So that's essentially what the message is.
I think that's kind of the benefit of EPIKA. We can tie in geography with context, because when Jesus would have told that parable in the first century, he didn't have to explain what a terrace farm is, because everybody knew what a terrace farm is. But today, when somebody reads it, especially if they've never been to Capernaum or don't know the layout, they have no idea it's talking about terrace farm and the four soils being the good soil, the shallow, the path, and the ferns. And that's kind of the idea of what EPIKA will be. Eventually, we'll tie all of the Bible to historical locations, to sites that happened. We're actually looking on to move on to Jerusalem next, build the temple, and build all the important sites in Jerusalem. We just wanted to start with Capernaum because we get a lot of ministry of Jesus over there.
Yes. Yeah, and actually also the other aspect, as a Bible, is a Bible you can experience, but is a platform also. So imagine we are doing a Bible study at home. You could have done everything that we did here with your small group in a Bible study setting, or for that matter, a pastor in the church doing a Sunday sermon. So this can be used also as a platform for the church to communicate its message, or small groups or authors or whoever has a message in a very engaging way, and particularly engaging for the digital natives. Digital natives, by the way, when we look at the demographics of the world today, they are in the southern hemisphere, they are already over 70% of the population. And in the northern hemisphere is 50, 60, but they are already a majority. So the majority of the people are digital natives that connect with this kind of media. So I don't know, I have a sense of urgency for this because it is absolutely the format of this generations.
So really, this is the vision of EPIKA, to build this product out, to make it available for people to use on themselves at home, but also in larger congregations, in small groups, where pastors, teachers, small group leaders can come on the platform, record their message or show the message, and share it with others.
That's it.
Thank you all for joining us. Please subscribe to our channel and look for future updates. Thank you very much.